Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into this video. We are doing some interviews following up of the Sharing the Bounty webinar. This is an interview about cooperative planning and succession. And then our guest here, if they could just introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I am Kristin Forde. I am a cooperative development specialist at the UW Center for Cooperatives. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Um, uh, Getting right into it. What would you say are some key steps involved when thinking about transitioning from a traditional business into a worker-owned cooperative or any form of cooperative?
So key steps in considering this model would be first of all, from the selling owner's perspective, sort of thinking through what their goals in the transfer of ownership are, what financial goals are, what their goals are for the business itself. Many selling owners want to see that business continue on in the community and to be sort of a real viable asset to the community itself. But also have their own goals in terms of what kind of selling price is reasonable and what kind of how do they want to gain financially through the sale of their business. Other things to consider are what does their current business look like internally? So do they have employees that have been there a long time? Do they have employees that are really committed to the business long term? And what kind of culture do they have internally? Are employees really engaged already with the daily operations, with decision making? And how is the business doing financially? Is this a feasible, is this a successful business? And I mean, getting further into that, like, would it be feasible for the entity itself to essentially buy the business, right? Like,
Mm,
so is it can the business itself carry the debt that would be required to transfer ownership to a collective, to a cooperative? Um, so I'll let you ask me some more questions because I'm
yeah,
not sure how far to get into the
yeah,
weeds.
definitely. I guess like on the other side, like what are some key things to think about for workers who maybe they're, uh, the owner of their business is thinking about this transition? What are some things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah. So um, I guess I'll just sort of zoom out a little
Mm,
bit and
hmm.
thinking about what this even is
Yeah.
for both the seller, especially for the employees, right? So if we're thinking about converting a business to a worker-owned cooperative, typically that's the most common type of conversion, although there are different types of conversions. Most typically it's, taking the business itself and converting it into an employee-owned cooperative, meaning and I know that you all have explored this, but that means that the employees themselves would become members and owners of this entity, but the cooperative itself would be um, essentially taking out the debt, right, to purchase. So individual employees aren't taking out personal loans in order to buy the business from the selling owner. The cooperative itself would be acquiring some debt in order to pay off the seller and or like pay a bank. Um, Most conversions, there is a combination of seller financing that takes place, and then also there's a bank note. Um, and so for employees, um, something to consider is that while there's less on the line personally, right? You're not taking out a personal loan. Um, there's a in a worker-owned cooperative, you're no longer just an employee. You're a member, you're an owner, and that requires much more of the employees. There's a fiduciary responsibility of those who end up elected to be on the board of directors. And some worker cooperatives, every member is on the board of directors. In some, it's an elected board, but that requires members to sort of wear a different hat, and to acquire new skills. Those skills are financial literacy, right? Understanding sort of the finances of a business, what it means to kind of think about the cooperative and the business as a whole, instead of just sort of your own place within that business. So, you're taking on the responsibility of sort of supervising and the performance of the entire business, including the performance of leadership. And those are it's a culture change, and it's also like it requires a lot of learning, and which can be an incredible opportunity, right? So
Right.
it's an opportunity for workers to take on new roles that they may never have considered before. Lots of learning opportunities, and it's a responsibility. Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you
And
want to chime
yeah,
in with questions?
yeah, it's to my understanding that there are some, and maybe the UW Center of Cooperatives does this, but like some trainings or education for those employees who are kind of moving into this. Could you like dive in a little bit on that?
For sure. Yeah, there's so the UW Center for Cooperatives, we have cooperative development specialists on staff. There are three of us, and we provide technical assistance to cooperative businesses at every stage in their development. So we would provide support to sort of businesses who are considering this on the front end. So helping with starting with selling owners, really explore the idea, think about if this is something that they want to invest some time and resources into, and help coordinate some of that. So we always recommend actually getting a feasibility study done. So working with partners to get that done and look at finances and ensure that this really is a viable thing. And once we get a study done and we look at what conditions would need to be in place in order for this to be financially feasible so that the selling owner gets their goals met, and we see that this really would be beneficial to the employees as well. At that point, we would bring in a larger group of employees to begin thinking about the transition. And we provide a lot of training and also facilitation through that process. We we would form a steering committee of employees. This is how I've done it in the past. We form a steering committee that's made up of employees at every kind of position in the business, and facilitate a process of writing bylaws and structuring the cooperative itself. And in doing that, they also are learning the democratic decision-making processes and how that works, while making really important decisions about the structure of the cooperative. So what the membership requirements are, and what the governance structure will look like. And then once we work through the writing of the bylaws, the sort of the most important document of the cooperative,
Hmm.
and then we move into operations. The transition takes place. Sometimes the selling owner stays on, and there's sort of a longer transition period, keeping that that expertise and transfer of knowledge over time. Sometimes the selling owner leaves right away, but either way, UW Center for Cooperatives can provide ongoing support, and typically we recommend at minimum 1 year.
Hmm.
And
Definitely.
very often it's ongoing indefinitely. I work with cooperatives who have been in business for actually decades, and still we're called on to provide training And cooperatives are most successful when they really invest in that principle. It's a
Hmm.
one of the cooperative principles, which is ongoing training and support. And those cooperatives tend to be most successful when we consider, training and education is one of our primary values. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that's great that you're able to kind of provide that support, especially even for already established cooperatives. I think, continuing education is something we really feel strongly about here at Wisconsin Farmers Union. Kind of moving into like once they're already kind of set up and have formed that transition, talking about like the actual decision-making processes, what are like some benefits of like that democratic decision making for the business? That you see in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so many benefits. It's challenging too because this isn't really what we're
Hmm.
taught, right? Like this
Right.
is very a different way of doing business, but um the benefits are so great. First of all, right, like when you bring people to the decision table who are most impacted by those decisions or really are doing the work itself, right? Like so
Hmm.
they tend to bring in perspectives that those who are removed from that work may not have, and we forget, right? As soon
Right.
as we aren't doing the work anymore, we tend to forget,
Hmm.
not intentionally, but we do. And so when we are inclusive of those, and it's not only that we are including, but we're getting advice or we're getting, we're
Hmm.
consulting when they are the decision making body. Um, there's we end up with better decisions. It takes more time sometimes,
Hmm.
but we end up with better decisions. We end up with stronger relationships. Um, and we also end up with stronger investment. We end up with
Yeah.
people who stay at the workplace longer. They step up.
Hmm.
They tend to step up into when we need volunteers.
Yeah.
We tend to get more investment from people who are actually make the decision makers. Also, when there's this learning that takes place, right? So
Hmm.
those who are working are more on the labor side of things. When they begin to understand and see everything that it takes to run the business, you know, uh, again, the relationships and trust is something that is built over time, but everybody's perspective is broadened. And so, I hesitate when I say this because I don't want to sound crass, but sometimes if we don't have full perspective, right? And we're used to a situation where we don't have power, it's easy and sometimes the only power we have is to complain with each other.
Right.
That feels like power. And
Yeah.
it's not really,
No.
but when we open the door and we actually are inviting each other to sit at the same table, it takes some time to understand our power. Um, but it's super impactful when those who have not been at the table before are at that table and understand um, how money moves through an organization, what money is actually required in order to get A, B, C, and D
Hmm.
done, right? Um, so yeah, I'll stop there for
Yeah.
now, but
No, I can definitely see like having that more responsibility and stake and like knowledge over how your business runs can definitely like give a more impactful like meaning to like when you're doing your because like oftentimes you'll still be doing the same job or a similar job that you were doing before, but you have a better and a more holistic understanding of your entire business so you can get and appreciate that more and maybe put in a little bit more like you said like people will stay longer, they'll have more of a say in the work that they do. and
mhm.
and we want to be like realistic about obviously like cooperatives are challenging, there's a lot of learning that needs to be done. What are some challenges that business face when they do this transition? And what are some ways that you think either through education or just some like learning opportunities that they can like overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the challenges are mindsets.
Mm,
Um, so there's mindsets, and then there's challenges that are real about skill acquisition. But
mm,
first, there's, we're accustomed to workplaces that divide labor and uh, and decision making um, in ways that don't necessarily build trust
mm, mhm.
or build trusting relationships, and certainly don't um, allow for decision making to exist across the board, right? And so I would say that one challenge really is that trust building across power dynamics, or trust building and power dynamics. So um, if historically there have been differences in positions and power, learning how to build those bridges and trust, number one, that those who have power are willing to share it, and trust that those who have power really do have the best interest of everybody in mind. And then, trusting that those who have not been in positions of power have the ability to acquire the skills necessary to make good decisions. Um, and so again, like really investing in the education that's necessary is really important. And also investing in that relationship building, looking at conflict that already exists within the workplace and addressing it on the front end has, pays off. And um, so those are the top two that come to mind. There
Definitely.
are, of course, other practical or just like very tangible barriers that
Hmm.
have to do with, if it's an asset heavy business, and how to make it financially feasible
Right.
for the sale to occur is, and also to make the membership accessible to workers who are have lower wages,
Mm, hmm.
so thinking about the equity requirements and then balancing that with the capital that's needed to make the sale feasible. Um, those, that requires a selling owner that's invested enough to make the conditions right for the sale. So seller financing, it typically is required, and that can help reduce those barriers.
Definitely. Kind of following up on some of those other challenges, like what are some reservations that you see from the owner's side? Like if they're thinking about transitioning, like are there any like perceptions that people might not be skilled or maybe not able to learn the skills needed? What are some ways that like either the UW Center for Cooperatives or other like cooperative development folks do to kind of encourage those uh, owners who are in like thinking about selling, like, hey, like these people can learn these skills or they already have some of these skills, like those type of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like it's a both and situation. Like one, I always encourage selling owners to invite folks that they think don't have the skills or are just workers to the table from the get-go, because the skills that they do bring, the experience that they do bring is um, far more valuable than we might think or know. Um, and also ensure that we are providing the opportunity for everybody to learn. I work with a vet clinic, and one like kind of aha moment for the vets was none of them studied how to like a P&L statement or how to, the financial pieces of running a business. They had to learn that. They went to vet school to learn how to care for animals. That business acumen they had to learn. And it's the same for any one of their employees, no matter if they're, a vet tech, a boarder, the receptionist, right? And so they all may have different capacities for learning, and um, they all need to have the opportunity to learn it. And so the other piece is that, and this is from that same example, like we had, I think, a group of 14 individuals that they across positions who were on the steering committee and wrote the bylaws together. And because we invested in that time and we, at the center, we facilitated that. So we sort of acted as the chair of that committee and facilitated the decision-making processes. They learned how to do that, and they were really amazed at the end that they were able to make so many decisions that they agreed on. They didn't think they would agree on anything, but it was through the facilitation process that they were able to come to reach so many agreements. And so really um, investing in that and allowing, so we can come in and we can help the whole group learn that different ways of decision making. And that was a very fruitful experience for them. So yeah, we're definitely a resource in helping not only acquire some of the skills, but the experience, and sort of guide them through that experience. Yeah.
Yes, we definitely love that hands-on learn, like where they're able to kind of build those skills, but also, learn about their fellow coworkers and kind of move towards, the goal that they want to see.
Yeah.
Um, and I know you mentioned this vet clinic. Could you talk about ex some examples of a successful cooperative, and maybe that's one that you'd like to touch on, and like how it impacted the workers and the business overall?
Sure. Yeah, there's so the vet clinic that I referred to, Cooperative Veterinary Care, so they were two animal hospital clinics, and clinics that were out of Spring Green and Mazamani. The owners were nearing retirement, not quite ready to retire, but wanted to start thinking about it, learned about worker cooperatives. And so we worked with them through the whole process. They had a feasibility study done. There is money through Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation that can help assist with that feasibility work. So they did apply for that grant. They financed the entire sale, converted a year and a half ago, and all eligible employees became members, and they're all on the board. So like I mentioned, there was a group of 14 people who wrote those bylaws. And so there was a lot, really like a high percentage of employees who were participating in that process, which I think benefited them greatly. And now all members are on the board. They decided to do that as a way of encouraging participation and learning, especially on the early side. And yeah, I mean, the way that they talk about it is that it's been hard and incredibly rewarding, both. They've had to learn a lot from the get-go about what they are requiring of each other, and how to make really hard decisions together. But they talk about it benefiting both the business. The business has been more successful since the conversion. They feel like people are more engaged, and they have a better understanding of how their performance at work impacts the bottom line, and they're benefiting from it. They have seen profitability and a return through patronage on that return. And so they're performing at work differently, because they see that benefits. But they also talk about just like personal personal gains, like growth personally, and how what they've learned both in skills, like, learning finances. Their treasurer had never read a P&L statement and is now giving reports to the board. And but also relationships. They are a cooperative that engaged in conflict resolution, and brought somebody in to work through some ongoing issues that had been there for a long time. And it has not been easy, but they have really benefited from understanding that conflict and engaging in those conversations with each other. So they have lost a few members who, in the end, that was hard. But in the end, they weren't a match for where they were going. And so that had been a hard learning curve as well. But also they have gained some members, and are I have been incredibly impressed with what they have, the level of commitment, and the owners have stayed on. And so that has been an essential part of their success. It's also challenging
Yeah,
for them, right? Because they own those clinics for over 20 years. And so letting go
that's a
is
big
a
deal.
challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. But overall, they've been really, really successful.
That's wonderful. No, it's great to hear like how they've able to work through some of those challenges and learn and grow as a group. And yeah, of course, like not everybody's gonna fit in necessarily. I mean, I'm sure that's the same in a typical job as well. I guess kind of wrapping up here, like, is there any like bigger tips or things to think about when thinking about a transition that you would recommend thinking about before, starting this process?
Um, yeah, I think things to really think about are, you know, using care with when deciding who to bring into the conversation and when. Um, I think that if business owners are thinking about this as a possibility, um, to really take advantage of the center and really engage with us around it before having lots of conversations with employees. I think that being inclusive of all sooner than later is a better choice than, sometimes we have conversations with leadership, but not others, or, and that sets the stage. And so I would recommend, yeah, using care and including all before creating, those dynamics from the get-go. Um, and yeah, I guess that's where I'll leave it. I would love to have conversations with folks who are intrigued, and we are really excited about this work in the state. So.
Wonderful. And then kind of just wrapping up, like I know you work with the UW Center for Cooperatives. Like, are there any other resources or even yourselves as resources that you would recommend checking
Well,
out?
we have a wealth of resources on our website
Okay.
at uwcc.wisc.edu. And there is a page on there for conversions, and you'll find, I would just recommend going on there to start. And then you can also find my information on the webpage. So happy to engage with folks via email or set up introductory meetings at any point.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for participating in this, and we look forward and hopefully people reach out to you if they're interested in starting a cooperative.
Sounds
Sweet.
great.
All right.